welcome everybody. I think it's first of all, it's a privilege and an honor for us that we have our audience in attendance today to join myself and Raymond. And yeah, hoping to make this session fun because anything surrounding audits is normally not fun. So hoping to make this as fun as possible. But yeah, maybe just to start off with, just some introductions, and then we can obviously, get right into it. Yeah, just maybe some like rules, or not really rules, just like for the proceedings of this webinar. If you guys have questions, please pop it in the chat. We'll get to them, as we go along, or if we'll have a dedicated session at the end. But we would like to keep it quite interactive. So yeah, feel free, to pop them in there, and we can, do our best to give you a good answer. That being said, my name is Wesley. My name is Wesley van Scytale. I am the head of customer success at Scytale, based in South Africa, Johannesburg. I want to say sunny Johannesburg, but we have so much rain. I think I might build a boat soon. But yeah, I myself come with auditing experience. I used to work for BDO and Deloitte in the past. Managed the team, had a couple of audits that I ran from SOC 1, SOC 2, did a couple of ISOs, did a couple of ITGC, SOX audits, different kinds of industries. And yeah, now heading up the customer success department in Scytale. And yeah, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Raymond Chen. The floor is yours for introduction.
Everyone, my name is Raymond Cheng, founder and CEO of Decrypt Compliance. Really excited to be here today. All questions that you have, please feel free to answer. This is a safe space. So this governance, risk, and compliance world, I started my life in this world in my career at Ernst & Young in the Big Four in Silicon Valley. I'm based in Silicon Valley today. Most of my working career has been in Silicon Valley in California. Spend a lot of those first years just understand the entire compliance landscape across security. And then at that time, the advent of more privacy compliance concerns such as GDPR. After that first phase of my career, I actually spent some time working internally in some of the Fortune 100 companies, Salesforce, Tencent, again, to see what it's like on the other side of the table in this weird compliance world. After some time, I decided to start Decrypt Compliance because I realized that audit firms have opportunities to do things a little bit differently today than they did, even 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so that's what we're here to do, is to provide a new experience for clients who are a little bit more modern and forward thinking and interested in doing things the best way that they can in 2026.
Awesome. Thanks, Raymond. Yeah, just welcome to Safiso and Mike. Thanks for joining, guys. And yeah, let's get into it. So, I mean, there's a couple of things that normally stand out with audits, right? The endless evidence chasing. The auditor comes, we need to pay all these evidences. Do we know if it's the right evidence? Is it in the correct format? Are we meeting the auditor expectation? It's Excel spreadsheets, it's, emails, and, without giving away my age, when I was an auditor, being on the auditor side, I mean, there was quite a lot of like manual stuff going on, so I couldn't imagine what the client would feel like. And, and Raymond, maybe I'll pose this question to you. When you typically meet with customers, when you start kicking off, that audit with them, how do customers normally, come across? Are they, do you see the stress? Do you see the chaos? Do you see them like worrying, oh no, are we going to make it? Maybe share with us, like from an auditor point of view, what's that typical first engagement that you have with customers?
Yeah, well, Wesley, the first engagement is really just to figure out what are you all about? How does working with you look like, and what should I be expecting? common, right? Any type of new relationship that you have with an external provider, you're trying to figure out what are the ways of working with you, right? Like, what's the best way to interact with you? I mean, every time that I've worked with, you know, delivered people or worked with uh, gardeners or worked with construction people, it's all trying to figure out what is the provider's mindset? How do you guys operate? And this, when it comes to compliance work, audit work, I always picture the you know, the kind of old school financial auditor, tax auditor kind of picture where auditor comes in and they're like, hey, let me see stuff, right? And then you're like, well, what do you want to see? I got this box, I got this drawer full of stuff right here, take a look. And it's just,
and they're not normally friendly,
right?
They're not friendly. Like, they're like, look at this auditor, like, this guy, what does he want? You know?
Right.
I remember the stairs, right? Walking in, like, you know, it's like, you know, now they have to make time for you. And auditors are normally like, people don't like auditors in general.
And you know, it's a symptom. It's a symptom of service providers being very focused on getting the job done, which I respect, right?
Yeah.
But as a service provider, we're thinking about what is the experience that you receive when you're working with us, and that is the whole differentiator. That is actually, it makes a huge difference, which a lot of professionals in the CPA and the audit world, they're not always thinking about, right? Because they're so much focused on, hey, I want to try to get the job done the best that I can for you. On the flip side, they may then have forgotten that, hey, by the way, this is an experience that you're having, right? You're experiencing working with us. So yeah, the endless evidence chasing is something that, if you imagine that old school, you know, here's the drawer, I you know, here, auditor, I want to be as transparent with you as I can. I want to help you do your job. How do I share this stuff with you? Here's everything, right? Now in the digital world, what does that look like, right? And you know, Wesley, I'm sure that you've seen in a lot of audits in the past, in your past experiences, where you don't have a you know, that there's no equivalent of that physical drawer, right? Although it's messy, it gets the job done. And then what people used to do is they'd open up their email and just attach everything to that, right? And just send emails over, like, let me send you 20, 50 different emails of the evidence here. Let me try to send you everything that I can.
And hoping they go away, right? So let me just dump everything and hope the auditor gets confused and be like, wow, 40 attachments or a zip folder, you know, or a link to a SharePoint with a dump, and maybe they'll go away.
Right. And then it ends up being, hey, auditor, like, what's the process? What's the plan? When are we going to be done? Right. And then the auditor says, oh, we'll take a look at stuff. We'll take a look at stuff. We'll let you know. We'll let you know when we're done. And it's like, wait, like, what's the timeline?
So maybe, you know, let's because I mean, a lot of the folks here that joined us, and you know, a lot of customers that you do meet, you know, this time around, you know, most like CISOs or most like, you know, head of compliance or whoever's leading, you know, the compliance efforts of the company will have one eye on 2026, right? You know, I mean, most of them probably would have planned everything, all right? All the projects happening next year. Feb, I'm doing ISO. June is my external financial statement audit with my SOX, and then I have a SOC 2 coming up in between. Then we have a HIPAA part of the SOC 2, and then, you know, maybe some regulator or, you know, the bank has this annual requirement that I need to comply with, otherwise they cut my business. I mean, there's like many things happening in here, right? You know, so maybe, you know, from your side, from an auditor point of view, you know, things like, you know, clarity on what is required, right? So when we audit controls, right? So, I mean, clear controls, you know, something that, you know, can help audits, you know. I mean, some of these frameworks, like ISO, for example, clearly defined controls, right? But like things like SOC, or, you know, something when it's like a SOX or an ITGC audit, you know, some of those controls are a little bit more manually defined, right? And then, of course, you have the evidence supporting the control, and all of this is derived from a risk, because we're trying to address a risk at the end of the day. So maybe, you know, a couple of words from an audit point of view. What does compliant really mean in 2026? You know, how can customers, you know, better prepare, you know, for their audits next year?
Yeah, Wesley, an average small medium business probably goes through some sort of external audit around some aspect of their business 3 times a year. It's intense, right? Today we're talking about IT audits. We're talking about security compliance, privacy compliance, AI compliance. But it's the same thing, right? It's just one slice of the business that you're getting some sort of external inspection over, so that you can build some transparency with your stakeholders. And I would argue that, you know, the compliance piece is kind of the last mile, right? What is actually the bigger piece is the governance and the risk management, and actually your team making sure that you're getting stuff done. But while we're doing all of these things, one thing that's easy to forget is that last mile piece of the evidence in place. And when we say evidence in place from a compliance perspective, any sort of activities that you have an external auditor who's going to be taking a look, you want to be thinking about what is the concrete, objective, log evidence, the artifact, the concrete thing that anybody can point to, even if they didn't know your company, and say, yes, you know, stuff happened, right? And that's, I think that is the piece that as an audit firm, I like to believe that audits are not a pop quiz, right? We know that you're doing stuff, we know that you're getting stuff done, and our goal is to try to find ways to help you understand ahead of time what is the right things that you want to retain, so that you can prove to an outside party that you're doing these things. I think that is really the most challenging part of going through the audit, is that frustration of when, hey, like I did these things, right? I did it. But then the auditor, because they have to then put on that objective perspective and say, well, I know you did it, but do I have proof that I can point to without needing to rely on your word? That's very good.
You know, if I put on my customer hat, right, like obviously, again, someone will lead the audit from customer point of view, but you know, if I'm in DevOps, or I'm sitting in, you know, some other department where I need to prepare evidence, you know, for this audit, you know, I have my day-to-day, right? I come in, like I wasn't appointed by the company to be chief audit evidence preparer. No, that's not what I do. You know, I come here to do a job. And I get audited, I know I'm doing my job. Like, I got all these things in place. But to your point, I think sometimes it's presenting it in a format that is acceptable, not only by the auditor, but also by the standard against what you're being audited, right? So, and I think also that's what frustrates customers, because I am doing these stuff, but I'm struggling to prove it to you, you know? So maybe like Raymond's auditor golden tip. What can a customer do? And we'll get into some of the other slides later that makes this easier, but maybe just off the bat, what can customers do to have evidence more audit ready, you know, to avoid this frustration?
I would actually think in vantage points. So if your goal is to make sure that you have things that you can point to objectively to prove that something happened, introduce somebody else into your world, right? Get their advice. So it's if you're the CTO, you're the CISO, you're the CEO, whatever it is, whatever process you're trying to get audit ready, bring somebody in who hasn't seen this stuff before and say, hey, if you were to point to something that proves that we did it, what would that look like, right? And that could be, you know, an external provider, it could be someone from Decrypt, it could be just someone else in the company, right? But adding that new vantage point does give you a little bit of more insight, because sometimes if you're involved in the process, you're too close. You're too close. You don't know how to prove it without your own mind kind of influencing that.
All right. So let's move on. I think, you know, we'll expand a little bit on that, you know, in the coming slides. But I mean, just, you know, preparation's key, planning's key, like anything in life, right? If you plan, it helps with mitigating the risks of things that can go wrong along the way, right? There might be, some audit question or query that you didn't prepare or plan for, but, in general, if you do like your preparation properly, then these things are smoothly, right? Especially if you're doing like repeat audits, right? So know exactly what the auditor is looking for, making sure that you're not, scrambling around collecting evidence last minute, making sure these controls throughout the year are, are operating effectively. We are, at any point of time, the auditor walks through the door, I can show it, right? And, we've seen like a shift, throughout the last couple of years where, this scrambling of evidence, the auditors coming in November, let's start September and get everything ready and, patch things up to get it ready. But as we move along, obviously a lot of platforms, a lot of tools start coming into play, the word continuous auditing or continuous monitoring, these things, are starting to, realize more in these days. So maybe from an auditor point of view, how much more beneficial is it for a customer to have a tool like that and be audited versus, not having some sort of tool and be audited? And I guess that's like, from an auditor point of view, how would you say, what's the difference in effort and that, what you would say?
Wesley, I say this all the time. Audits are not a pop quiz, right? And when you have a process or a system to establish what is it what is the control activity and what is the related evidence that we're expecting to be working with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that expectation set down together, that reduces a lot of the administrative overhead. I mean, would it even be safe to say over 50% of that kind of overhead is reduced, right? A lot of the conversations of what is it you guys do? What is it that we expect to see? What's the evidence? Like that, this kind of administrative alignment, this overhead of just speaking the same language, being able to point to the same thing together, right? No, so it's again, audit's not a pop quiz, right? It's the idea is working together earlier on to figure out what is it that we expect to see, because of course we already know, that you're doing stuff, right? How do we just make sure that we're proving that you're doing stuff?
100%. Yeah, and I guess having a tool helps with that, right? And as we look at, if you move into like bigger organizations, you start looking at like, it's normally like a team that would prepare it, right? And sometimes you have a consultant, an external consultant working with the internal team, or maybe it's the internal audit department preparing it, or the compliance, or whoever takes ownership of it. But again, having a tool in place, having clear communication, having evidence flowing, between the tool and the team, and then, having the auditor also plug in, so you almost have this central point or repository of evidence or controls being monitored by the collection of evidence, and the auditor have sight of that, and then obviously the team can use that in order to make this process, much easier. And we touched on the planning and preparation, side of things. So maybe for the audience, what is typically, and there's different audit frameworks and all of that, but what is typically like, how many months, like before the actual audit start, would you recommend, auditors or customers meet with the auditors? I mean, because most of the times, you will have set dates, but I know some auditors like to meet a little bit earlier, or, do like an interim test. If I think about my ITGC days, do like an interim test, and then you do like a top-up testing at the end of the year. But maybe to put this in a question to you, how many months before the actual audit would you recommend the customer meet with the auditor in order to plan and prepare for the audit that's coming?
Well, Wesley, I'll flip that around and say, well, what is not an ideal time, right? What is the worst time? The worst time is probably last week, right? A week ago. The the earlier on you can involve your service providers into the process, the better, right? Whether you if you have the foresight to plan this 2 months out, 3 months out, maybe 6 months out. Hey, we're entering 2026, right? Is it a good time to start the conversation now so that you can get all of the building blocks together for 2026? I would say the gold, if you can actually involve your audit firm within the year, amazing.
Okay.
6 months, great. 3 months, that's probably the sweet spot that I do see quite often. Now let me share you a little bit of insights into what is going on in the auditor's mind, right? When we think about working with a client.
Yeah.
So scope of the work, right? If we're talking about a SOC 2, we're talking about ISO 27001. What are the parameters for how this audit and certification and how this audit report, how does this work within the context of that framework? And based on that, when is a good time to start the conversation, right? And it depends for every framework and every company and every environment. So that's why I said earlier the better, right? You can start, you can talk to us now and we say, okay, well, based on your situation, let's check back in 3 more months, 6 more months, you know. But the earlier the better.
All right. So let's change the conversation a little bit and talk about a little bit like the do's and the don'ts, or the ones and the don't ones, right? So from an auditor point of view, like what are the I don't know, top 3 or the good things that you would like to see, like when you open up a tool? Like let's establish that right now on this call, right? You need a tool. Like gone are the days with Excel spreadsheets. Like, you know, guys, if you're still using that, you know, I seriously recommend getting into contact with Scytale or someone, right? Get in contact with the tool. Let's chat. Let's get you on this tool. Let's make your compliance automation easier. Let's make your audit process easier, right? Gone are the days of spreadsheets, right? So you have this tool, okay? The tool is doing all kinds of things. What does an auditor like to see or would like to see? And what are the things that they don't want to see? Like, I'm not talking about like, you know, the incorrect evidence or whatever. That might be one thing, but yeah, maybe from your point of view, like what are the things that you want to see and the things you don't want to see when you would like get access to this tool?
Now, Leslie, the right tool for the right job is what I always say. And in a lot of teams, and I mean, I've done this before myself as well, right? But we sometimes default to spreadsheets. There's certain fields and professions who you default to spreadsheets because that's what you know. But the question is there a better way to do things? Is there a better tool for the job, right? You don't bring you don't bring a screwdriver when you need to hammer a nail. You know, you bring the hammer. So what are the top 3 things when we look at evidence in a platform? So number 1, a clear mapping of the requirement or the framework, the criteria, whatever the framework is calling for, a clear mapping of what it is that we're trying to achieve and what is the evidence associated with that, right? That association itself is already something that is made much more clear in some sort of tooling that's fit for this job. The evidence that's coming out of the system, right? How is it going to be shared with the auditor? Is it shared? Is it presented in a way that the auditor can have some confidence that they're going to get the full scope of that evidence? Is there going to be anything missing, or do they have confidence that they're actually getting the full extract? Dates and timestamps are very important in terms of an audit. Depending on the framework you're working in, you might be looking at the scope of the audit may be kind of a retrospective where you're planning to look at a certain period in the time in the past, or you're looking at something in the current date, right? But having that, the logging, the date, timestamps, however that's presented, but being able to know when I look at this file, when I look at this screenshot, when I look at this evidence, what is it? When did this come out, right? What am I looking at? That gives a lot of context to help with the audit, and it's these kind of small things that, again, getting up to the point of the audit, you've taken care of so many things, right? You've thought about risk management, you've thought about governance, you've been actioning, you've been doing stuff, and it's all down to these very, very small, minute details that when the auditor is looking at stuff, because they need to have that objectivity, right, to be able to point to and say, hey, like, I know this happened because I see it here, right? That's what a lot of these tools helps us to do.
Maybe a fun question, right? So what was the most shocking or like, wow, what am I looking at? Evidence you've ever seen?
Gosh, the most shocking evidence. I mean, Wesley, it's not uncommon, right? But because we're talking about IT audits, we normally expect that things are system driven, right? They're coming out of a database, they're coming out of a tool, there's some sort of extract, there's a source of truth, there's like an IT application system source of truth that our evidence is pulling out of, right? And as auditors, we love knowing that there is that source of truth, right? That everybody knows that this is the go-to place for this data. But there have been plenty of times where we've gotten like handwritten extracts, where it's like, hey, HR is managing. Of course, HR is managing, who has joined the company, what access they need, what's their role, all those details, and it's on physical papers, and doing that in an IT audit in 2025 and now 2026 really soon. It is interesting to see that still happens, and I'm sure that it helps get the job done, right? Number one, I'm sure that it's helping you get the job done at the moment. But is there a better tool for the job? There probably is. It probably makes everybody's lives easier.
That's an interesting one. Handwritten. I'm sure no one on the call is still doing that, or have an HR department with employees' names on a piece of paper. I mean, that's all right.
Happens.
Audit week. Right. So now we're going into the audit. It's day one. We've planned everything. We have a tool. We have a consultant helping us. We're ready to go. But sometimes I still see like a little bit of an anxiety, like even especially if it's my first audit happening. Customers still feel like that little bit of anxiety, not really what to expect, and it differs from customer to customer, right? But maybe for the audience on the call, just to put them at ease, and when they speak with their colleagues, about that first day audit. Maybe talk about these points, like day one expectation, what happens during testing, what actually happens in the back end, when questions come up, or, like review notes or open items or queries from the auditor kind of view, how fast things move with clean data. And again, it goes to the point of having things prepared, but maybe in general around these points, tell the audience about that day one, that audit week when you start, and maybe a little bit more focus on that first time audit. Yeah.
No, absolutely. The getting started, of course, day one, like try to set those expectations again. You're working with a new provider. Try to get a sense of what are they all about, what's going to work for them, but also bring your own perspectives, right? What your audit firm provider is probably trying to figure out is who are the people that are going to be involved in the audit on your side, right? How are things being coordinated? Who do we talk to? But the other tactical thing is, what is everybody's capacity, right? So today, a lot of the clients that we work with, whenever they're using a sort of GRC or a compliance management tool, there is a leader within the company who knows IT stuff, they know security stuff, they know the controls, and they say, well, let's check in, let's have a standing session, right? We'll have a standing session, 15, 30 minutes every day. If we need it, we have it. If we don't need it, we won't have it. But keeping that cadence together while we're also working asynchronously, and asynchronously working within the platform, right? We're reviewing stuff or creating some comments within the platform itself so that you don't end up having 20 different email chains floating around. You don't have 20 different Slack DMs floating around in terms of what you're working on. And you have that status that's very clear and easy for everyone to see at the same time, right? We're all looking at the same status together. So a lot of firms, they come in and they say, we'll take a look at stuff, and then we'll let you know. But I challenge you to ask your providers.
Hope this goes well.
Exactly. And I challenge you to ask your providers to give a little bit more of a clear deadline. I mean, besides the finish date, or maybe if they don't even normally give you a finish date, like aim for at least to have a finish date for the project, and then have some milestones. Ask them what are the meaningful milestones that we can set together so that we know that things are going on track. When everything, like we said, the right tool for the job, audits are not a pop quiz, right? So when we've had a chance to work together earlier in the process to know, hey, like this is what the controls look like, this is what the expected evidence is going to be, the audit itself moves way faster, because a lot of audit firms that you may have worked with in the past, or maybe the first time, it's not uncommon that day one of the audit is the first time that your auditor team ever has even understood or seen your environment or even started working with you, right? And of course, that then creates friction, right? Because we're still trying to figure out, how do we work together? How do we so and so, right? Definitely encourage you to start the conversation early. With Decrypt, we love doing that. We have many planning and kind of expectation setting calls and logistics calls before that audit actually starts, because then we know how you guys work. We know what's going to work for you. You know what's your timeline. We know what's your capacity. It helps the audit get done way faster.
And maybe to elaborate on that point, right? Looking at the tool, the consultant, the auditor, having that one workflow, where everything works together. I mentioned earlier, having the tool with the auditor plugging in, client plugs in, and in the middle, you have that consultant, helping, this tool, works well and everything is good and all of that, but, when we look at collaboration between Scytale, and the auditor, Scytale and Decrypt in this case, right? Having the same auditor across frameworks, especially, in this time and age, we have people that has like SOC 2 ISOs, they have the ITGCs, they have, all kinds of like PCI, but all kinds of like frameworks that they need to comply with, right? And, yes, I have the tool, but, preparing it takes time. Again, this is, I wasn't hired to be the chief audit preparer, audit evidence preparer, right? I have other things to do. So having that consultant, assisting me, with that preparation, when I use the tool, I'm not expecting to have gaps. I don't want duplicated efforts. I want to do this one time for all my frameworks. I want to avoid this back and forth. I provide your evidence. No, it's incorrect. What about this? No, you need to do this. Where's this evidence? No, I put it there. No, I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong control. Oh, we're looking at the same place. All these confusion, that can happen and going on, just because, we don't have one repository. We don't have someone managing the project, we don't have the auditor and the client and the consultant talking to each other. So maybe in this question that I want to present to you is, from an auditor point of view, how much easier is it for you to deal with the tool, with the consultant helping the preparation of the audit, helping the client getting ready, as opposed to, again, maybe not having a tool, maybe not having someone assisting the client, and having this like collaboration of everything just coming together in one place, making everything much more easier and quicker to complete these audit projects?
I mean, how much easier is it for everybody, quite honestly? It's about speaking the same language, and it's about working with the right people that understand your company and your environment. If I were to try to Google, SOC 2 auditor, ISO 27001 auditor, like all these different frameworks that you're going to be working in, you're going to get a mishmash of results. Even and I have a lot of empathy for my clients, because if I were to sit down today and try to figure out who's going to be the best audit firm provider to help me with all of my different needs, how do I do this research? How do I put 2 and 2 together? That okay, so you do this framework and you do this framework, and you have a team that can support me on all of this. I mean, just figuring that piece out, I think, is a huge logistical challenge.
Yeah.
So what we try to do,
and also
is
making up the mind. I mean, you have so many options, right? It's like when
absolutely.
I go to a restaurant with my wife, she has all these options to choose from, but she can't make up her mind. So I'm like, just choose one. But I don't know. I have all these auditors. Who do I need to choose?
Right.
You know?
And the thing is, it's not like you iterate. It's not like these iterate daily or weekly, right? It's a slower cycle, and it takes time to figure out what's going to work well for you. But what we do at Decrypt that's different from a lot of other firms is, when we assign you an audit team, it's actually one singular audit lead across all of your frameworks. So you actually are working with one core individual throughout the entire life cycle of your company's operations, across all of your different frameworks, whether it's security compliance, privacy compliance, AI compliance, right? Yeah. So you got the team that has the right context, whereas a lot of other firms, they'll bring in a point specialist. They'll say, oh, you're looking for SOC 2? We got a SOC 2 team. Oh, you want ISO? We have a separate ISO team, but they can share notes with each other. But you got like another set of 3 people, right? And there's a little bit of that. It's again, like, it's like anytime you bring in a new team, things change, the dynamic changes, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
With platforms that are available today, it's way easier, Wesley, like you were saying, it's way easier to point to the same thing together and know that you're looking at the same thing. I mean, how many conversations have you had before where you have this email chain? It's like, all right, I sent you version 1. No, this is version 2. No, here, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Okay, wait, it's version 3 now. Okay, wait, which file am I supposed to be looking at? Like that, it's the administrative overhead that when you're working with an external provider, right, you're trying to be, because as an audit firm, we don't need to, right? We don't need to have direct access to your entire environment, right? More than happy to, if that's something that you're interested in doing. But most of the time, we totally get it from a confidentiality perspective. You want to show us what is necessary. And we want to focus on that, right? And because of that, there's that overhead of, okay, let me try to pull what I have and try to share that with you externally. How do we get that done, right? So again, right tool for the right job. It speeds things up a lot. It reduces a lot of headaches on all parties.
Yeah. And maybe for the audience and for those who couldn't join and maybe going to see this later on, we will share this, on our LinkedIn page. When we work with Decrypt from a startup point of view, right, you as a client get a assigned consultant. That consultant checks in with the assigned auditor from Decrypt. They collaborate, they plan, and they make sure when you go for the audit, everything is running smoothly in the tool. You don't have to worry about, did I upload the right evidence? Yeah, the tool does a pretty good job to do all of that, and you'll be fine with the tool without the consultant. But what we find is having that consultant just gives you that peace of mind. Having this expert that has done so many audits, that has worked with different frameworks, different industries, just gives you that peace of mind to have someone handhold you through this process, and being the single point of contact, being your representative, and meeting with the auditor and telling the auditor, company ABC has prepared all of this, we've done this, and sort of like, working together with the auditor, to go through things and making sure everything is ready for the actual audit to begin. And I think the biggest pain point that I've seen, customers face is getting like these audit queries or open items like, I don't understand this evidence, or can you provide me more evidence, or what about this or that? These things happen, right? But then having that consultant stepping in on the audit on the customer's behalf and say, you know what, I spoke with Bob in DevOps. This is what they do. This is what the evidence means. And then the auditor to be like, okay, no, that makes sense. So maybe a couple of words on that, Raymond, by having actually a consultant representative from Scytale, working together with one of your auditors leading the project.
Wesley, it's about it's about speaking the same language.
Mm.
And I think maybe hopefully a parallel that drives this home is, for anyone who's gone through a home rental agreement or have gone through buying a home, selling a home, that certain fields have, there's complexities in every field, right? And in that process of renting a home, buying a home, selling a home, you've probably glimpsed at a lot of the different laws, terminologies, all these different clauses and sections, and ultimately what helps is when you have the agents, right? They're the specialists who are doing that translation of what does it mean for you versus, and how do we communicate that in the proper terms so that the buyer or seller, so that they understand what specifically we're talking about. And it's the same thing here, right? In the compliance world, we're talking about very specialized professions here: security, privacy, AI, compliance, audits, right? I like to say that we kind of operate in this niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. And so when you work with folks from Scytale, the consultants from Scytale, they are kind of the translators, right? They're a little bit of the translators who understand your world. They understand the terminology, the audit process. They understand the language. And so they can help provide a little bit of that editorial translation so that we understand more quickly what is the process that the company's following, and how does that translate into the audit world.
All right, very good. Yeah, I think maybe on that note, yeah, I think we've covered a lot, and we went through quite a lot of content and discussion points, and cognizant of time, and obviously the good people that has joined us for this webinar. Let's maybe take, like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. Guys, any questions for Raymond or for us that, you're like burning to ask? Ask away.
It's a safe space. And, Decrypt, we're all about transparency here. Audits are not a pop quiz. We're trying to help people understand what they need to do to get themselves through the end of the tunnel. It can be quite daunting sometimes, so totally understand. I've been there myself.
So I see we got one. So how early should we start prepping before our target audit date? We sort of touched on this one a little bit earlier, but maybe, yeah, Raymond, maybe again from your side, how early should a client start preparing for an audit?
Yeah, well, let's give a concrete example, Wesley. I mean, let's say if we were talking about a team that is looking to get their SOC 2 audit done in 2026, right? Let's say that they're starting from scratch today. I would say first, in the SOC 2 world, we're thinking about what is our desired end audit period in that report, right? So a SOC 2 type 2 is the most common report that companies are going to be asking you for. And a type 2 indicates that there is some sort of time frame that your auditor has done an inspection on. I recommend that is at least a 3-month time frame. That's kind of the industry. That is kind of where the industry is headed. Is that 3-month time frame is that minimum need? So working backwards, then, do you have control? When do you have time to carve out to implement those controls, and then you can continuously operate those controls for 3 months, right? So I mean, Wesley, from your perspective, then, in terms of getting that timeline together, implementing the controls, how long do you think it's going to take to implement controls, and working backwards then? Like, let's say that we are trying to get a SOC 2 type 2 report in hand by the end of June 2026. Where do you think in terms of implementing and monitoring those controls before we say, hey, we're ready to bring in the auditor?
Yeah. I mean, from a consultancy point of view, right? So, we need to understand what's the audit period. I guess, typically first-time starters go with 3 months. If this is a 12-month audit period, typically, I would say 3 months before the actual audit date, evidence should be pretty much 90% ready, and then whereas, typically, we would get in contact with the auditor and start discussing, the process of reviewing evidence and going through that, so, you said it earlier, the earlier the better, so we always try when we meet with the clients using the Scytale tool, which does most of the heavy lifting in any way, just making sure we cover the gaps and we get the rest of the evidence, going. But even like after the gap analysis meeting that we have with our customers, we already set up that audit date with the customer. And then, we start making sure we address the gaps as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to cut that answer short. So I see we have a couple of questions to go through from, we'll start with Lee. How do you recommend organizations maintain continuous compliance rather than treating it as a once-a-year exercise? Raymond, maybe you start, and then I can also give my comments on that.
Yeah, continuous compliance. And so if you live in the GRC world at all, you've probably heard of that continuous compliance, continuous monitoring as a buzzword for the past few years, but really it's the right tool for the job, is my opinion, right? We have the right tools available for this job today compared to 10, 15 years ago. If you were to maintain continuous compliance previously, I'd say that you're going to spend a lot of time, and you're going to have someone like compliance as their full-time job, because they're just going to be checking all the controls constantly. So I think the first question, like, think about the right tool for the job to help your company feel comfortable, right? What for you gives you confidence that things are happening continuously? What are things that you want to check? And then in terms of working with your audit firm, like, talk to your audit provider, ask them, hey, like, you guys, we definitely want you to come in once a year. Is there anything else that y'all can help us with, so that the audit is not a pop quiz, so that there's no surprises in our results? How do we have that continuous feedback loop? I'd say talk to your firms and see if that's something that they're interested in doing. But Wesley, what else can you add here?
So from a Scytale point of view, again, the tool and the consultant will assist you in this one. So understanding the nature of the control is important, because some controls, are annual controls. For example, reviewing and signing of policies, right? So making sure that's in place. But typically where organizations struggle is, controls that operate, on, like an ad hoc basis. Like, for example, when you're merging a pull request into production, when a new employee joins, like, there's controls that happens for these things, right? So definitely having a tool like Scytale with the integrations that monitors your environment 24/7, the tool will flag that there is a gap that you need to fix. So the only way in my mind is having a tool 24/7 that monitors your environment, and having a consultant to assist you in understanding, is this something I need to address now, or is this something that I can address later? So I hope that answers your question, Lee. Next one from Safiso. How do you recommend we coordinate between internal compliance readiness work and the external audit, so that testing isn't duplicated and clients don't feel over-audited? We get this a lot. I have a lot of clients that, like, that pre-Scytale, we had all this evidence, and then I have to do it again, So are there practical ways to align scopes and share evidence more efficiently? Let me take this one first, Raymond, and then you can, add it on. So again, having the right tool for the right job, I'm using Raymond's words. So having a tool that maps the evidence across the frameworks, right? So if you break it down, you have frameworks which are made up of controls. Controls are proven that they work based on evidence. Multiple controls are shared across multiple frameworks. They might be worded differently, but having MFA is pretty common. Having your code being approved before being merged, pretty common, right? Having a proper onboarding process before hiring an employee, pretty common. It's worded differently, right? But the evidence is the same across the frameworks. So again, having a tool that does that lifting for you, and when, like, for example, in Scytale, when you upload the evidence, or when the integration is collecting the evidence for you, it automatically maps it, by itself. So again, having the tool that does that for you, and making sure that you have someone reviewing that, and and that it's obviously in the right format for the auditor, if it's not automatically collected. But Raymond, maybe for a couple of comments on this one.
Wesley, like you said, the right tool for the job, and then audits are not a pop quiz. Can you bring in, back to the question we had previously of how early do I start? I mean, when are you starting to think about it, right? As soon as you start thinking about it, connect with your provider, your audit firm provider, and say, hey guys, this is where we're at. we're trying to figure out readiness stuff. This is what we're doing.
Mm.
How do you guys do your audits, right? What's the right type of evidence that we should be collecting so that if we come to you for the external audit and we want to try to leverage some of this readiness work, is there a way that we can make this happen, right? And then it goes then down to the details of, okay, like what are the logistics of audit date and timestamps? Is this the right type of evidence? Is it the objective evidence, right? But again, like I said before, there's no better time. Earlier is always better.
Yeah.
But when we can get this right, we can ultimately let that audit experience just work so much more smoother because of that.
Definitely. All right. And then I think we have time for one more from AJ. How do you assess an auditor's quality? Very good question. I've seen a lot of low-cost auditors come into the space, and I want to help my clients demonstrate that this is not the right decision. Raymond, this is, I think, all yours.
So audits are not a pop quiz, right? I think the best things that you can do, 3 things. First, understand the credibility of the firm, right? The final deliverables that you end up sharing with your customers, whether it's from one audit firm to the next, they're going to look remarkably similar, right? So the question is, do you feel confident in your audit firm provider's credibility and authority? Are they connected to the established organizations? Like, are they part of the, if you're looking at the SOC 2, the American Institute of CPAs governs that SOC 2 framework. Is your firm, the firm that you're working with, are they connected in some way with AICPA? Are they part of some committees? Do they have certifications? Are they at those conferences? Are they one of the thought leaders there? The second piece is transparency in the process, right? Because again, what we talked about is planning in advance, coordination, making sure that your firm understands you. And so the question is, how do we make it so that there's no surprises when we go into the actual audit? I would ask your provider a couple of different things, right? Like, what is your process for how you do these audits? And what do you need from us, right? If they can really clearly articulate these answers, you can tell that they've thought this through enough, that they've done this work enough to be able to consider what a quality job looks like. Third is methodology. So you could ask them, how would you scope our project, right? What are the kind of things that your firm does to make sure that you're doing a good job? Do you have some sort of testing methodology? How do you sample test controls? What type of evidence do you look for? And what are the factors that differ in auditing my business compared to other businesses, right? And once you start to get a sense for, do they have a structured way? Do they have a process that's repeatable? And are you talking to someone who feels like they know what they're talking about? You feel confident in working with them. If you have an opportunity to speak with their audit teams, right? Like, just get a sense of who they are, and are they someone that you're going to gel with? And do they have that reputation that you're going to feel comfortable with? At the end of the day, it's you'll be able to find many if we're talking about costs, there's a huge spectrum, right? But it comes down to, what is the level of trust that you're trying to build with your customers? How confident do you feel that the project itself is going to go successfully and smoothly without burning down the rest of your business, right? That's what's going to tell you what a quality firm looks like.
Great. Well, guys and girls, thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar. We'll share this obviously on our LinkedIn page, and please share this with your colleagues. If you have any further questions, please reach out to us. Happy to answer any further questions. And do share with your colleagues about what we do at Scytale and Decrypt. But thank you so much for your time today, and have a great day further. And thank you, Raymond, as always.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was great seeing you again. Very transparent here. Audits not a pop quiz. If you ever have a question, feel free to let me know.
Here you go. Cool. Thank you all. Bye-bye.